We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cannabis Marketing Live. I am your host, Jake Litke, the CEO at MediaGel. Today we have Adelia Fakri and we have Ernest Tony. Welcome to both of you. We are going to be talking about fundraising, which is a challenging thing to do in any environment and especially challenging to do in the cannabis space. I know I've been through it multiple times myself in different iterations. And we're going to get some tips and advice on approaching the process of how you want to go about fundraising, and then also talk about what happens when you catch the car you've been chasing and what do you do next. So, first off, let's introduce our guests. Adelia is the founder of Event High, which is a active business that some of you may have heard of, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And she's got a couple other things that we'll get into. And then Ernest, who I've actually met before in person a couple times, is out of Colorado and runs BIPOC Can, which is a incubator for social equity license holders in the Colorado area currently, but there may be some expansion going on later. So thanks for joining us. I will start, Adelia. Maybe we'll start with you, and I'll give you a chance to better describe Event High and some of the things you've been working on.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jake, and very excited to be here for the Cannabis Marketing Live and also Media Gel panel. This is really awesome with Ernest, of course. Yes, my name is Adelia Fakri. I am one of the co-founders of Event High and the CMO. If you haven't heard of Event High, we are a ticketing platform catered to the cannabis industry. We have built a compliant software that allows event organizers to sell tickets and sponsorships for their cannabis related events. You're also, as an event goer, able to find unique events all throughout the US on our platform. And these events range big and small, from intimate yoga, health and wellness type events, all the way to big festivals and conferences. I also am one of the founders of Blunt Brunch, which is a women empowerment organization. And we have been scaling that across the US. But just to add a little bit when it comes to my fundraising background, I had a company 12 years ago prior to Event High called Direct Cannabis Network. And that was actually when I really dove into experiencing what it is like raising capital. I went through a accelerator program. I went through raising pre-seed money with angel investors, and then took that experience and now able to use that to help raise capital for my current company, Event High.
Great. Thank you for that. Ernest, tell us more about BIPOC Can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Jake. It's great to be here with you and Adelia. Nice to also be with you on the panel. My name is Ernest Tony. I'm the founder of BIPOC Can. We started the business back in 2020, really as a response to what I saw as being a lack of representation for minority and underrepresented entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry. For the past 4 years, our focus has really been on providing the support that is needed to help social equity licensees not only have access to a license, but to start a business, to grow it and sustain it. Just out in Colorado alone, we've worked with over 60 unique businesses, and we've helped several of them, go through that process that I just described, including help some raise funds over the past couple of years. Excited to be here.
Great. Thanks for that. All right, so we'll start at the beginning side, which is let's say you've got a license or you have an idea, maybe you have a prototype, and you are going to go out and raise money. Now, it's a big topic, and and as I said before, it's generally going to be very difficult to raise money in any environment. Um, Cannabis is especially hard, and I would say it's even harder over the last 3, 4 years than it was early on. We started Media Gel in 2018, and we raised like a seed round, and then a small Series A. It was significantly easier to do at that time because there was still a lot of excitement about the future, and everyone thought that cannabis was going to be legalized in 2020, but that didn't obviously happen. And so, and what has happened is, in my observations, a lot of the investors that were interested in the cannabis space, which is a subset, obviously. So let's take out institutional investors and companies that don't want to mess with the things that are that come with cannabis. A lot of those investors put money in and lost money, or they have their money locked up in positions that are underwater and they can't sell them, right? So that whole like kind of early gold rush, green rush set of investors are kind of off the table now, and that now it's hard to find people to raise money. And the other issue that you run into is that valuations are very, very low, right? We're in like a pretty bad hangover position with if you want to look at comps for cannabis companies with public markets or anywhere else, the valuations are terrible, right? So you've got, in addition to cannabis being difficult, the fundraising environment is also incredibly difficult. So, okay, all of that aside, and you still are, will have an idea and want to get after this. Um, Adelia, how would you how would you give someone like the starting path of like how to think about things and where to go?
And you nailed it right on the head. I'm like everything you said is exactly the experience I went through. We saw that transition, having those conversations. Those angels are like, nope, I'm sorry, I'm reinvesting whatever money I have to keep this said company alive, and
Hmm.
that's where we're at. But besides that, yeah. So how to position your business? You need to get crystal clear on your revenue model. It's not just the mission that you need to be focused on. How are you going to make revenue for your company. The other thing is learning investor language. When I first raised for my first company, I didn't realize there was a language out there until I started talking to these investors, and they're wanting to know, what is your runway? What is your burn rate? What is your CAC, which is your customer acquisition count? There's a lot of these different things that you need to start understanding the ins and out of your company. And also build traction around your business before you start raising. Have some sort of small proof of concept. With specifically with Event High, we actually had like a beta stage, so we worked very closely with our customers, try to understand, is this a concept that is needed, that is going to grow? And then also, in a way, kind of, try to position yourself more as a scalable business. I think especially in the beginning, I would always strive because I was proud that I was a small women-owned brand. And that is great. You do want to, showcase, I'm minority owned, we are women owned. Things like that are great conversation starters. But when it comes to speaking with investors, you really want to show that you can scale this business. And it's not about, necessarily the people behind the brand. That is part of the story. But the real part is, can this business scale? And so I think those are, the key focuses I would say in the beginning to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. When you have either a minority or woman-owned business or really any other, social proof type of message to your business, that is an advantage, but it is not the only, you can't stand on that as the only thing, right? You can say that this is something that it does give you an advantage specifically from a marketing perspective, right? Because now you have something to differentiate yourself from potentially your competitors. Um, but then the question is, that you have to be able to answer is, okay, so how are you going to take that advantage and leverage it? Because it doesn't work on its own. You have to, apply leverage to it. All right, so let's talk a little bit, Ernest, about now you've got how many companies have come through your incubator at this point? I think you mentioned 60. Is that right?
So between 2022 and 2025, we had uh, yeah 35 unique businesses, and we have another 24 who are in our spring cohort. So um, some of those are returners. So we're between 50 to 60, unique businesses that we've worked with over these structured, 10 to 15 week programs, which really focus on, meeting the founders where they are. In some cases, they're pre-revenue and they just have an idea. Maybe they just received their license, or in Colorado, they call it suitability. Before you get the license, it says, okay, you've met the conditions to apply for one.
Mhm.
Uh, so we'll work with folks who are very early stage and have an idea and want to bring that concept to market. But we also work closely with those businesses that have established some revenue and are in growth mode.
So I asked the question because you've got a pretty good data set that I want to be I'm curious about, right? So you've had people come in at all phases, like I have an idea, I've met the suitability threshold, I've actually gotten a grant, which we'll talk about grants here in a little bit because that's a different way to raise money. Um, in the time period that you've seen, um, how would you kind of bucket the set of businesses that have come through your program in terms of businesses that have taken flight and kind of crossed the chasm, gotten to 0 to 1 or whatever you want to call it, where they've made it to some semblance of a business that's operating, versus the ones that haven't made it. And of that, we can break that into two groups: ones that haven't made it, but you think have a good chance at it, and then ones that haven't made it and just for a variety of reasons probably are never going to make it. Um, Statistically, what does that pie chart look like for the world that you've seen?
It's all over the place. I wish I had that exact number for you. I think a lot of times it really is dependent upon the business, the founder, the team. Also, I mean, part of that includes like their experience in running businesses before, and not just like how much capital they may have available and can bring to the table, but really the things that I see influence success rate is those are founders, regardless of the vertical. They've done that groundwork. They've figured out what is it that's going to set their business apart. So they've done that, the market research, the brand positioning. Maybe like in a place like Colorado, where you often hear the words competitive and oversaturated, uh, for businesses that are trying to be new entrants, they really have to figure out what is it about them that's going to set the brand apart, and what is it about that founding team that's going to set them apart too. Because if there's somebody in a situation that has like a ton of skills with relationship building, already has intimate knowledge about the brand, has done all the legwork to make sure that they're compliant, then that's going to likely increase their chances of success. But I've seen, I'd say that, early on in this industry, it felt like everyone was trying to pursue a retail license, and we know that those tend to be the most expensive and require the most capital. And I also see high failure rates if they're not able to sustain the time and duration and money that's needed to open those doors. In recent years, I've seen more of a shift to branded products. So manufacturing brands have started to really catch on and get a foothold in the market. And I've also noticed that years ago when I was talking to cultivators, a lot of them were just saying, "Hey, we just want to grow. We grow the best stuff," and they weren't really focusing on their brand and their differentiation. And I'm seeing a shift there. So yeah, I think the folks that are doing that work tend to tend to have a leg up.
Yeah, I mean, you see this with any type of business, but I think it's more prevalent in the cannabis space for someone ultimately that's selling products, right? Whether it's a retailer or a brand, at the end of the day, something is getting picked up off a shelf or delivered. And a lot of people come into that saying, oh, well, I grow the best product, so people are going to buy my product and they're going to keep buying it, right? Um, and that's maybe true a little bit for some amount of people, but it doesn't really work that way, right? You have to do marketing, you have to have consistency in your brand, um, and a lot of retailers had a similar thing, which is like, oh, I open a dispensary, people will just come here because people want to go to dispensaries. And again, that turns out to not be true. And Adelia, you've got an app, right? That's another thing I've seen. I have lots of experience building apps all the way back for like many years. That's another thing that people think like, oh, I'm gonna put my app on the App Store. It's great. I love it. Everyone else is gonna love it, and we're just gonna get tons and tons of users. And that never happens. Well, almost never. There's always exceptions to that. And so you see people with their business plans with these like very optimistic spreadsheets they've put together, right? And they'll take some stuff like in the early days, people, it's like, well, if I can get 10% of the market, that seems like a reasonable small amount, right? You take a big market, take 10% of it, and be like, oh, great, we'll be making $5 million in the first year because we'll get 1% and then 2% and 3%. Um, and that almost never happens. And a lot of people build their fundraising strategy around that. And you end up in a place where you take your first round of money, that gets your app launched, and then your take rate is not what you thought it was going to be. And then your planned, your Series A or whatever your next round is, you run up into an issue where you didn't put enough money, you didn't raise enough money to get to where you needed to go to get the next round, and then you're in a bad place, right? Um, let's Adelia, let's talk about for um, for your current app that you have. How many? Because you've done a little bit of fundraising, right? And then you're planning on doing some more later. But like for the seed or pre-seed work that you've done today, like how many people did you talk to, and how many people said no? Usually it's a lot of no's.
Yeah, it was a lot of no's, and I literally I have an Excel sheet over the years for both of the companies that I raise money for, and it's a list. It's a long list of 100 different investors. Some of them, and it's not always an easy connection. A lot of them want to be introduced to you before they'll even have a discussion. So in my Excel sheet, there's a list of like different color codes of like this is one that I need somebody to introduce me to. This one, I can only find their email. This one, I can only have their address or their phone. So, there was a lot of no's in a lot of different ways. Even I would cold call to these investment firms or these angels just to try to get a conversation going. Um, so I would say easily over 50 no's for Event High. We had again a couple yeses. We also did pre-seed for Event High. As I was saying, I did it for DCN, but for Event High as well. And those no's get hard. You do get unmotivated, but you have to keep going because once that yes comes and you have somebody behind you, backing you that you vibe with, that also gets the vision and sees what you're doing. The doors open because they also have other investors or people that they can recommend you to, or they give you advice. But yeah, easily over 50 to 75 no's before we got a yes. And the yeses are very little, but they can change everything for you.
Yeah, I would build on something you said, which we haven't really talked about, choosing your investor. I mean, sometimes you're like, you ask 50 people, only one person or two people say yes, and that's what you deal with, right? You're like, okay, these are my investors.
Yeah.
Um, However, that is someone that you're going to be in business with. And much like starting a company, I sometimes say that like founding a company with someone is can be more of a responsibility and logistical nightmare than a marriage, right? To another person. It's like it's actually easier to get out of a marriage and it could be easier to get out of a business, right? And so this is someone you're going to be living with in some form or another. Your investor is not usually a day-to-day type of interaction. But you did mention, finding a good investor that has other people that they work with, right? Because if they're interested in what you're doing and you get some amount of traction, they're going to bring in, their network to some extent. And that was
Yeah.
something that worked well for us. Our early investors had a big network and they brought other people in. And that's extremely helpful. And it also allows them to kind of spread their risk around. And so the other thing to think about is what where is that investor going to be in your subsequent rounds, right? If you're raising whether it's $100,000 seed round or 50, but you know that you're going to scale and you're going to need potentially millions of dollars later, where is that person going to sit in that? Are they someone that can write $1 million check later, or do they at least or can they introduce you to people in their network that can get you there? Um,
As you say that, one other thing I just want to touch in on, you're 100% correct. It is like you're basically getting married to them in a way.
yeah,
And the other thing is though, not all money is good money. Investors need us just as much as we need them. I know in the
yep,
beginning, you almost feel and I know this was probably again an ego for an entrepreneur, but you feel like you're begging sometimes for money, and it's like that's not what you want to do. And so they need you just as much as them. They're not going to be able to increase their own revenue and incomes that they're trying to make off of these investments if they don't have you. So again, be strategic in who these people are before you say yes. Research them because they're researching the heck out of you. So talk to other startups that they've invested in, find out what that experience was like. Are they more hands-on? Are they more of just an advice component? You have the right to understand who's coming into your company and who's investing because down the road, like you're saying, what are they going to be able to go into that Series A round as well? What can they bring down the table? But also, oh my gosh, I just lost that train of thought. But it was
That's all right.
it'll come back to me. I know
Yeah.
it's not the long term, the future.
And comment on something you said. No, I think that's really, really, really a strong point that is sometimes overlooked, especially when I'm talking with new founders. It's that idea of, the ask feels like begging, and they really should be thinking about, hey, this is a partnership, and how can we make sure that the mutual interests and goals of both parties are aligned. And I think a lot of times when, folks are looking at how much they need or don't have, it's like, okay, desperate. I'm just asking, but yeah, like they also need to recognize that there is value that you're offering through this licensed business, this limited opportunity that has the potential to, operate and grow, and depending on the type, could even go to multiple states. And so I just wanted to like comment on that because I see that being missed a lot of time in these conversations. It's not a one-sided thing.
Yeah, and there's some benefits, Ernest, to the way you have that conversation with investors, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you're dealing, at least when you're dealing with angel investors or small firms, even, maybe it's different if you're dealing with like a private equity firm, that's a different kind of situation. But if you're dealing with an angel investor or a small firm or a group of investors, they're people too, right? And they likely have money because they've had some amount of success in some industry, and they've transitioned into a part of their career where they're now, trying to leverage their money to get into to be diversified. So, they probably have some valuable insight for you, both in the planning phases and as you grow your business, but also communicating with them like you want more of a partnership. Like, look, we're all going to be owners in this business together, not I need your money and then don't ever talk to me again, is going to serve you a lot better in terms of getting to a yes, right? So. It is easy to forget, especially like Adelia, when you go talk to 50 people and there's 49 no's and you just get a variety, it is disheartening. And it does start to feel like just a revolving door of rejection, which is, you know, that's part of being an entrepreneur. Like you
Yeah.
have to be willing to face rejection all the time and hardship. So,
And have the hard
um,
questions asked that you might not have thought about. Again, you're saying there's at times, especially in the beginning when we were all raising years ago, we all had this shiny vision of, we're going to be able to get acquired by XYZ. And then things change and look at where we are now as an industry. Yeah, you have to realize that what you thought isn't what it is at this time and day. And you got to be ready to change what that scope might look like in your pitch deck and when you're raising capital.
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of capital, and this is an area that I know very little about. I spent most of my career doing startups, but something I've never done is gotten a grant. Ernest, how does one go about getting a grant? Where do you even start with that?
Yeah, but like most things, it varies. It depends on what you're doing. But I can tell you what was something that was really neat and unique for Colorado in recent years is there was actually like a legislation that was passed back in 2021 where they took percentage of tax revenue from adult use sales, and a small percentage of that was used to create the cannabis business office. So Because cannabis is still federally illegal, there is no small business administration for cannabis. So at the state level, this office was uh, designed to sort of serve that purpose. So they were able to provide technical assistance in addition to grant dollars for licensees who met certain criteria. So I know that there are a couple other states now that have similar programs where they've been able to give out, grants. I believe the OCM, like in Minnesota, is working on that. I know New Jersey, the Office of Social Equity in Maryland has awarded grants to license holders over the past couple of years. So I would say, if you are in the industry and the first thing is check in with that regulatory body, see if there is some type of a similar office that has resources that are available. And then outside of that, there's always there's always opportunities with local foundations that might give grants to businesses based on your type. I think, if you're a woman or a minority owned business, sometimes there are grants at the state level that are available. So there's a variety of different resources that you can look into. Um, in past years, I know that there have been pitch competitions, sometimes at conferences, sometimes at local community events. But those are types of ways where you can, just like try to get a pulse on what's happening within your community, who some of the leading organizations are, try to find where there may be some alignment with your business. And if you can narrow that focus, then I think you start to see if you're a little bit closer to being in a position to qualify for some funding that is not going to take equity out of your business. So that's the cool thing about the grant capital.
Yeah, and have you seen, you don't have to like give specific names or anything, but for some of the businesses and startups you've worked with that have received grants, what are some examples of the way that they've deployed that grant money to get some business success?
Sure. Yeah. So just sort of thinking about early on with some of the early recipients through grants from the Cannabis Business Office. If they were in the delivery or the business to business, like transport sector, they were able to use grant dollars for equipment. So maybe they were able to get another vehicle purchase, which then supported their ability to hire and increase their operation, their ability to take more deliveries or do more transports from, cultivator to retailer. So those types of activities could have a direct positive benefit on their capacity to increase sales. In other cases, whether it's like a brand, cultivator, um, or retail, some of those grant recipients use dollars to support hiring for additional staff and employees, or for marketing purposes to try to support brand awareness and customer engagement. Um, and I've seen some businesses use grant dollars to support purchasing equipment. So one of the things that is common for a lot of revenue producing businesses is they can go to a cannabis friendly lender and get like an equipment loan. But if you're pre-revenue and you don't have that 3 or 6 months runway or history, then usually those lending opportunities are not available. So a grant that can be really helpful if you want to, get that manufacturing equipment so that you can go into production and things like that. So,
Great. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And the answer for some of the stuff is sometimes not super interesting in the sense you're like, okay, what'd you do with the money? Well, I bought a car, right? And now I can now I can deliver more products, or I bought a manufacturing machine. Um, we've certainly, I think everyone has seen plenty of startups that raised a bunch of money and did very splashy things with their money, throw big parties, whatever big activations with questionable, value. And that's sort of maybe a general tip when you have a constrained amount of money and that money was expensive to get in the first place. Try to think about, okay, I'm going to take X dollars and put them into something like, what is the outcome of that? And actually doing the math behind it. Working in marketing, most of my career in marketing technology, I've seen a lot of people, you get let's say you hire a marketing person. They're like, oh, we're going to sponsor this event and we're going to get this booth and we're going to do this. And you say, okay, that's great, but what are we going to get out of that? And this is a similar conversation that you can have as a business owner that the investor is having with you, right? Okay, well, I'm going to give you these dollars. What do you have? What do you think is going to happen? Well, if the answer is, oh, we're going to get exposure and we're going to get new customers. Well, how many, right? Forcing the function of thinking about the math of what's going to happen downstream is very, very helpful, right? Okay, so what is a positive outcome? Because a lot of times people don't even think through what a positive outcome means. Like, okay, well, you're going to get how many new customers are you going to get? 5, 10, 20? What is the value of those customers? Like, and then you can back to what you were saying. Well, now you can break that into a customer acquisition cost. Okay, if I spent $10,000 sponsoring an event and I'm going to get 10 customers, and I would say I'm kind of thinking in a B2B context here, right? Not necessarily like individual customers. So now I've spent $1,000 on those customers. How long does it take me to get that $1,000 back in profit? Will I ever get that back? And thinking through like those outcomes. And these are the types of questions that investors will ask you as well, right? Okay, I'm going to give you these dollars. How are you going to allocate it? Okay, 20% to marketing, 30% to new equipment, whatever it is, and being able to respond when they actually. So that's actually a good place. If you've gotten to the point with an investor where you've presented your business plan and how many dollars you need, and they start digging in on those questions, that means they're interested. And now you've got like the fish is on the line. But that is where a lot of people fall off if they're not prepared. Because if you can't answer those questions, then why does someone want to give you their money?
Yeah, you nailed it. And that's actually something that I can tell you we've been working on including into our curriculum for those businesses that are, especially the ones that have some revenue history now. Because a lot of times it's like these folks are just trying to get the doors open at first. And then once the doors are open, they're like, okay, we want to actually show that we're getting some revenue. And now they have the revenue, the next step is, okay, do you understand how to you understand the numbers behind your business? Do you understand the operational efficiency? Sometimes people will say, "Hey, I made $300,000 last year." It's like, well, investors might want to know, okay, well, what was your margin, your growth rate, what was your retention? Do you know your customer acquisition costs? And a lot of the first-time businesses don't have those answers, but they all say they want capital, so got to be
Yeah.
prepared to know those answers too.
Yeah. Adelia, what were the questions that you've been getting? I mean, you've got an event business, so I mean, by its nature, you've got pretty good data, right? You know how many users you have, you know how engaged they are. Um, how does that conversation go when you're talking to investors right now? Yeah, what are they asking and how does that go?
Yeah. Well, they're definitely diving into the business model because when you're looking at Event High, we need a lot of transactions to become a profitable business. So they really want to dive into what does that business model look like? Because we're only getting a portion of the processing and service fees. Everything else goes back to the event organizer and obviously our banking and financial institution. So they're really diving into what other ways can we increase our margins when it comes to revenue. They are asking the same thing, what is your customer acquisition? How are you scaling? And the one thing I will say that kind of is a benefit for with Event High, and it's something that has all we're very grateful for. That's been like something that they've been interested in is that everything has been word of mouth for Event High is how we've grown everything from the very beginning because the event organizers have to push it out to their network and the event goers that are looking at these events are inviting their friends. And so over the years, as we've been able to grow our data, grow our community, we're now also able to kind of push that push that marketing back to these event goers and highlighting all these different events. The other thing is, it is that funding ask. They really are breaking down, well, let's say, okay, you want to raise 2.5 million convertible note for your seed round. What are those funds going for? And so we have really had to dive in, for example, for us, we're doing like majority is going to be going to our technology because that's what's going to help us get these bigger clients. Then there'll also be the marketing because if we don't have people interested in buying these tickets, we're also not contributing there. So yeah, I think those are the key things that they're asking specifically for a company like us at Event High. It really goes into revenue or business model, customer acquisition, and what are we going to do with these funds and how we're going to scale. We definitely have proof of concept now. We've been here since 2016, so now it's just showing how are we scaling and increasing those numbers.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we should move on to the post fundraising portion, but before we do, just a couple like quick questions for both of you. What's the one, if you had to pick one thing that you wish you had known before you embarked on your fundraising journey, what would that be? I'll give you, we don't have buzzers, so you can buzz in on whoever comes up. I know it's kind of a broad question. Um,
Um, so back in 2022, I joined an accelerator program and I got about halfway through the program and realized I'm not ready to fundraise. And my mentor at the time was like, "Hey, actually, that's a good thing to know." Um, I didn't have, I had this great vision and had a little bit of traction, but we were deficient in so many areas, including team. Like there was way too much that was reliant on me. So I had to like work on processes and also do some team building so that we could be in a position to increase our chances at raising. So
I like that you mentioned that because I think too, going into it, a lot of people, there's this hype, there's this like attraction to thinking everybody needs to raise money for their business, but you really don't. Or not every business does, and not every business should. Um, but yeah, should I go into one thing I learned?
sure,
Sorry.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think for me, it was fully understanding how much fundraising changes, like the psychological weight of leadership, like how much time you're investing into raising money. You have to be fully invested in raising money while also still making sure the company is moving forward. So it's juggling that. Understanding that when you're putting your own money in and you're bootstrapping compared to having other people's money involved, the responsibility shifts completely, that dynamic. Um, and then also just realizing that, yes, I think this is a great idea, but having that confidence and fully diving into um, do other people get this vision? Am I really solving a problem? Is this something that others would want? So I think for me, it was really more diving into all the questions that I wasn't prepared for when we started having those conversations with investors.
Yeah. And then one thing that exists today that did not exist for all of us when we started our journey is the AI systems, right? Um, you can go to Claude, you can go to ChatGPT, and I mean, at this point, really, you can learn anything you want for like a $5 a month subscription. Like that just is the world we live in. So in many cases, like you have no excuses not to learn things anymore. But at the same time, you can go to one of these systems and say and tell them like, okay, you are a very mean venture capitalist, and I'm going to try to raise money for you from you. I'm going to tell you my idea, and then you tell me all the reasons why you don't like that idea, right? This is a great coach. I mean, everyone has kind of any coach you want right now. So,
I love that.
um,
I'm gonna do that. That is a
yeah,
great trick.
yeah. A good word to use with LLMs is adversarial, right? So, if anything you want to do, like, oh, go look at my website and give me an adversarial review of it, and then it'll just, it'll pick everything apart for you, which is what you need. You
I'm going
need,
to borrow that one for sure. Yeah, thanks.
yeah.
For reals.
All right. Okay. So let's say that we have gotten past some seed funding. Either we got a grant or we got some venture capital or some seed funding. And I like to use a joke of like the dog that's been chasing the car down the road forever that finally catches it, right? Okay, so now you've got the car. What are well, we'll start with you, Daily, because you're right in this right now. Um, you money is in your bank account. You have a plan that you came up with, which of course reality is never going to do what you want it to. Um, what are, how do you think about that next phase of because you're gonna have to learn, and you're learning with other people's money now, maybe some of your own also that you put in, and certainly your time. How did you or how do you approach that?
I think that part, you got the money in the bank. It's very exciting. You're like, we did this, and you're right. You think you've planned it out all thoroughly, but you have to take a moment and step back and reconfirm what your strategic priorities are now before you spend anything. I know you mentioned it earlier, and we saw a lot of companies make those mistakes where a lot of them, the first thing they did was probably get that big shiny office and started hiring so many people when in reality it feels good to be able to finally be able to hire and add more people to your team, but you have to think about all those salaries and incomes and now who you're in charge of and how you have to make sure you're going to be able to pay them consistently moving forward. So again, reconfirm your strategic priorities. See how you can extend your runway first as well, because the truth is, yes, you've closed this money and you now have to figure out what you're going to do with it. But very quickly after, especially if you raise your seed round, there's going to start being talks on your Series A. Once you get these investors, they want you already to start thinking about that. So you do want to make sure you're able to extend your runway and have the ability to keep the company going while you have, change your priorities back to fundraising. Um, Hire slowly and strategically, as I kind of mentioned a moment ago. You have been able to do it with such a lean team for so long that test these people before you bring them in on full salary. Give a trial period and make sure they're the right fit. Um, and the biggest thing is, invest in revenue generating activities first. That is the smartest thing you can do. Again, you don't need to rechange everything around the company. Getting that office, you can hold off on for a little bit longer. Again, focus on revenue generating activities. And yeah, those will be key.
Yeah, the people are expensive.
Yes.
They're not just expensive from a payroll perspective, they're expensive from a time perspective as well, right? So anyone that you hire, generally, we'll speak in generalizations here, um, means that this is another human being that you're going to have to interact with. If they're a new to your organization person and you've got a new idea, you're going to have to train them. Those things are uncertain in terms of how successful they will be. The other reality is, I think when people start companies, the you it's human nature to kind of like ignore a lot of things that are going to happen. Like the reality is all companies are either going to get acquired or go out of business. Like at some point in time, that's going to happen. Everyone that you hire is either going to quit or you're going to have to fire them or your company is going to get acquired. So like everything is transitory on some level over whatever timeline exists. And so I think if you remember that when you're bringing resources into your organization, it helps as a little bit of a like fact. Okay, so what is getting into this, like bringing this person into the company, what is it going to be like when that person has to leave for whatever reason, right? Um, and how much time, both from yourself and for the rest of your team, are they going to consume in just like the natural amount of communication that has to happen amongst team members? There's definitely like the too many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody knows that saying. Um, and it's a little more nuanced than that, but I was just firmly reiterating what you said about be very cautious about your hiring strategy. It's very easy to be like, oh, we need a person to do that and a person to do that and a person to do that. And again, we'll go back to some of the AI systems. There's a lot less need for some of the individual contributors that you might have needed a couple of years ago. Um, so, uh, Ernest, you've seen people go through this cycle, right? Do you have any thoughts on you've got your check in the bank?
Yeah, I loved everything that Adelia said because and I'd love to, I think I'd like to add to that too by saying, I always encourage, or at least for me, like when we've been in a position where we've received, some grants or had an influx of capital, um, it feels nice because now like some of that pressure or stress has gone away. But I just try to think and operate as if those funds never hit my account, because that is always going to sort of keep me in the mindset of, okay, how can I be more conservative with my, expenses? How can I continue to focus on revenue generation? And obviously, like when you have those dollars that are deployed, there's usually, you may have there may be some ways that you probably have a plan in place. You should definitely have a plan in place if you don't, or how you want to use those. But one of the things that I see is I think folks taking the foot off of the gas. It's like, whew, I'm excited. I finally got this. And now I'm gonna sort of slow down. It's like, no, keep the momentum, keep focusing on the revenue generating activities. And one thing that I'd add to that is like document. You know, there's so many things that you can measure that actually shows the effectiveness of your business. And I think it's important that you understand not only the numbers behind your business, but you're also tracking, okay, what were the outcomes for uh, what happened after I deployed these dollars that we just raised or that were just granted. Because if you can use that to tell like your next, to improve your story for the next round of fundraising, but you're already measuring from the beginning, then you're saving yourself time, uh, not looking back to try to figure out what you did on day one, day two, et cetera. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And something that was brought up earlier is the amount of time it takes to raise funds, right? It really does take a lot of time. And just due to the laws of physics, that means the time you're spending raising money is generally not time you're spending growing your business. In very rare scenarios, there might be some way that those overlap slightly. Um, but generally, we were going to do our next round, like the sort of mezzanine round of funding in 2023, maybe. I don't know. It was bad timing. Um, and we went and I spent a bunch of time, talking to investors and venture funds and presenting, and ultimately just decided to pull the plug on that because it was a waste of time and the velocity was slowing down in other things like on the product side that I should have been working on rather than going and talking to bankers. And we just made a decision of instead of trying to raise capital to accelerate growth, we decided to let's just keep ourselves profitable and grow with the revenue that we had. And that turned out to be the right decision for us. Um, that doesn't work necessarily for everyone, but to your point, Adelia, like raising more money isn't always the answer. Even though some people might be encouraging you to, especially if you're dealing with constrained time windows, right? Because if you're going to lose 50% of your time as an entrepreneur for a 6 month period going around, that can be devastating for your business, especially if you're in a competitive market and your competitors are not doing that, right?
No, yeah, I agree 100% on that. And as we were kind of having this conversation, I related a lot to that because we did the same thing. It was after, for us, obviously being a ticketing platform, COVID completely almost took our company down. Things started
Yeah.
gearing back up for us in 2 years ago, 2024. This past year, 2025, we finally are pre-COVID numbers again. So now we're now on that growth phase again. But I remember in 2023, we did the same thing. We were going to start raising for Event High, and the conversations weren't there. I know we talked about it earlier as well. A lot of the investors didn't want to put more money into newer companies. They're holding back. Other outside investors are still not ready. They've seen what all these other investors have done, and they, it's not exciting to them anymore. But one thing I wanted to bring up with that is there are other resources. We've talked about grants. We were looking at a company called Startup Engine, and I think that is another great tool for startups to look at that are raising, that want to raise money. It is a little bit It's still a lot of work to get your business up there, but they do accept some cannabis companies. If you are licensed, if you are compliant, they are interested in having your company on these equity crowdfunding platforms. So definitely look at that as another resource. Have the conversation, see what their terms are, and it is still that commitment like you would when you're doing regular investing, but it's a little bit you now are in front of a lot of investors very easily after you've done all the work and set up your profile. So just wanted to bring that note up before I forgot that was almost a journey we took ourselves.
Yeah, there's those are the like the Reg CF platforms, right, where you can do the crowdfunding things. Yeah, we've looked at those in the past as well. Another thing for someone who's early in their sort of in the business cycle is there's a lot of angel groups that exist. I had a previous company. This is many, many years ago. Um, and there's a group called like the Keiretsu Forum. They've got chapters all around. They have a process. I think they're still around. They have a process where you kind of, you give them your pitch deck essentially, and then they have a committee, and they'll choose three or four kind of finalists, and then you get to go up and present in front of like 30 to 50 angel investors. Um, that's how I funded my first business in the early 2000s. And we raised like 300 grand, I think, doing that, which was the amount of money we needed to build our first app and get things launched. Um, and there's things like that in every city. So looking for and finding those angel investor groups and trying to get in front of them is it's a good way because you get unlike unlike going to a VC where you're going to talk to a room of two, three, maybe five people at the most. When you talk to an angel group and there's 50 of them, you got a better odds, right? That one person in the back of the room is like, I kind of like that idea. Let's talk more. So,
Very true.
okay. Um, Ernest, I was gonna ask, on the post-funding side for some of the companies that you've seen come through. Now, let's talk a little bit about BIPOC and exactly what happens when someone goes through your program. Um, you've got either someone who's just about to embark on their entrepreneurial journey, easy to say. Um, and you have people who have grants, you have some people that already have established businesses and they're just looking for sort of business education. How does it work exactly?
Yeah, so yeah, it's neat because we sort of have two tracks that are available. So you have our pre-revenue track. It tends to be folks that are well, everyone that it includes people who um, maybe they've already figured out like their license type, they've already figured out the property and all that, but they don't have their doors open. You may have some folks that just have an idea and they don't even have like a minimum viable product yet. So they're trying to figure out how to see if this is actually something that they can bring to life. So the challenges that those early stage businesses have will be a little different than the folks that are already up and running, generating revenue. So for the early stage folks, we really want to focus on helping them understand their competitive advantage, their story, how they can best increase their chances for success in the marketplace. So there tends to be a big focus on some of those business fundamentals. In some cases, these are first-time entrepreneurs. So not only are they trying to figure out how to, run a business for the first time, they're doing it within cannabis, which is also very, very challenging. So there's a big focus on us opening up our network, making relevant introductions so that, they can take care of some of those foundational things like access to banking or finding a good cannabis attorney or lawyer. And obviously, like those folks are going to be a bit more focused on regulatory and compliance concerns. They need to make sure that they're, checking off all the boxes at the state level as well as the local level. Um, it gets really exciting once these businesses are getting close to opening up their doors or they're already in a revenue generating in the revenue generating phase. So those businesses are in our track B, the growth stage. Um, I like working with those businesses because there's already this track record. So the traction isn't just the revenue and the sales that they've made, but they actually have, numbers that are based off of stuff that's happening in the marketplace. They have a customer base. They've tried some things. They probably failed, on some things, but they're a little bit more experienced and farther along. So we really want to like help them focus on the numbers, the finances, and how they can strengthen their competitive position within the market. So they each, regardless of like the track that they're in, they're getting some structured curriculum. We also have direct mentorship, and we bring in some advisors from subject matter, different subject matter experts and folks with different domain experience who can help them with the challenge that they have at the moment. And we try to wrap up our program with a event at the end. So we use platforms like Event High
There
to
you go.
help people to bring the community out there and give the participating businesses a chance to be seen, showcase their hard work. And yeah, like our big goals are actually trying to go from being an incubator to a business that is also providing grant dollars to support the businesses that come through. Um, so one of our big fundraising goals is actually like working with companies to attract sponsorship dollars to support that. We also, have like a fiscal, a nonprofit fiscal partner. So it allows us to have these charitable, tax deductible contributions. We would like to be that source that can provide some of this non-dilutive, non-predatory grant capital to the businesses that have done the work. So
Non-predatory capital.
yeah,
It's crazy talk.
no, we don't. I mean, 'cause, yeah, we don't want ownership in anything. We just want them. We want to make sure that they have dollars that can s- increase their chances of sustainability. And yeah, the reason that we do this is not because we want a stake in anybody's company. It's to help them get off the ground.
It's great. We're just about up on time. Adele, I have a question for you about Event High. Um, it's focuses on the cannabis industry, but I have to imagine some amount of people have found uses for it outside of the cannabis industry.
Yes, yeah. Um, and we get calls like that all the time. And it's funny because either, let's say it's a reggae concert, they're not just trying, they see an interest. So what they'll
Yeah.
do is they'll utilize either their regular platform and then utilize Event High, or they'll solely use Event High. We've had actually even high school reunions use Event High just because they've heard it, their friend likes it, and they're not necessarily utilizing our marketing tools that we add, they're just using the ticketing. So anybody could really use Event High. The bonus with using Event High, though, is if you are trying to get in front of this set cannabis centric audience, you'll get that access with through our marketing that we provide to event hosts that use our platform.
That
So,
makes sense.
yeah.
And if you are, what is the breakdown of the type of events that people are using your platform for?
So we actually have over 12 different categories, but the ones that we are seeing that are the most intriguing, I guess, or the most that people are going to are health and wellness type events. Anything around dinners or food, people love these kind of experiences, whether it's cannabis infused foods or maybe it's not infused foods, but there's a food component around it. Also, a lot of like farmers markets and cannabis cups or cannabis. There's one called Farmers Cup in San Diego. They've been using us since the beginning, and a lot of festivals. So I would say those are the top ones. With the fifth one being business and networking. But there's so many other different experiences that we see on Event High. One of my favorite ones that I remember was called Sushi and Doobie, where you learned how to roll a joint and you learned how to roll a sushi roll. So they are getting creative out there. There was a jazz festival in cannabis. It really anything that you you like when it comes to cannabis, you can create an event around it. But yeah, those are the categories that I say are the most that we're seeing on Event High.
Well, you have your, what is it, Blunt Brunch?
Yeah, yeah. We
Do
were
you
blunt
roll?
brunches.
Yeah, but do you teach people to roll blunts at the brunch?
No, so that's the
No.
thing. We ours is we always make a joke, we're women that love our blunts, but what we do at these events is we have blunt conversations.
I see.
So topics that women can have together that may not be able to have in front of their allies or their partners or in front of their employees. They just really get vulnerable, and we really just have strong conversations that are blunt.
That's great. I went to a mixer as a MJ Biz, and it was burritos and blunts
Oh, what?
for brunch. There were
Yeah,
in fact blunts there at that one.
yeah.
That was not there's not a double entendre with the being blunt. Um,
Yeah, those are good ones too. Yeah, all you can find all different types of cannabis
yeah.
events, which is really cool to see.
Okay, so I want to thank both of you for sharing some wisdom and your time today. Real quick, if you could let everyone know how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in having follow-up conversations about your businesses.
Uh, sure. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Ernest. It's Ernest L. Tony. You could also visit the website Ernest at BIPOCAN. Sorry, or email me at ernest at bipocan.com. That's BIPOCANN. Yeah,
Two ends.
two N's.
All right, great. Adelia?
Yeah. Thank you again for bringing this conversation to the table. You all can connect with me at eventhigh.io, or I'm on LinkedIn at Adelia Fakri. My email, I'm happy to give my email. I love mentoring and just chatting and masterminding. You can email directly at Adelia at eventhigh.io. And I just had some final words really quick. Just one thing. Always remember this: the more capital you are going to raise, the more voices are at the table. And as a founder, you need to be ready that one day, as you continue to raise your fundraising round, you have to be ready that they might not see you as a CEO anymore. So you have to realize you're building this business for the business, not just for you to always be at the top running it. Just wanted to end with that on my end.
That is a good note. And things will get difficult at some point in your business journey. And it's all high fives when you close the fundraising. But when things go sideways and your investors are asking difficult questions, personalities can shift a little. So be prepared for that also.
Yes, so true.
All right. Thanks again for your time. This has been another episode of Cannabis Marketing Live, and with our guests, Adelia and Ernest. You can reach them. There will be an email follow-up for everyone that attended with some notes on how you can get a hold of everyone, and have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.